If you're not experiencing the ups and downs, you're dead.
I'm not sure there could be a more fitting guest for the podcast this week. Known as the Maverick, Michael Tobin is an entrepreneur, adventurer, and philanthropist, tuning old scavenged pianos to being the CEO of a FTSE 250 business. This is a real rags to riches story. Given your childhood, I imagine you probably matured pretty young. You had to mature pretty young. Moving to Rhodesia at 7 years old.
Right into the Civil War, we were petrol bombed 4 times. Twice we weren't in the house, twice we were. I was shot at least a dozen times. One went through my leg. I was spat at, swore at. All my life I'd been in a position where I'm fighting for every step. And so having something that's just happening around me, it was time for me to feel pain again.
Do you look back on your childhood fondly? I mean, it sounds pretty turbulent. Do you look back on it fondly or not?
Do I look back on it fondly? Well,
Mike, I think it's fair to say you had a pretty tough start to life. Growing up in Bermondsey, 3 siblings, violent father, moving to Rhodesia at 7 years old. Tell me a little bit about your childhood.
Yeah, well, I'm very old now, so it's a long time ago, but I hope I don't listen. We were kind of East End. My dad was one of kind of 8 or 9 siblings himself. Very, very rough, worked down the docks, in and out of prison all the time. As you said, quite violent to my mother. So as soon as she had an opportunity to escape, he happened to be in prison one particular time, and she kind of took me in and ran. My other siblings were much older than me, so they had already kind of left home and ran away as quickly as they could, but I was 7. And so we went to the place that she had. She was working for a company called British Rhodesia Steel, and they said, I'll come to Rhodesia. I didn't even know where Rhodesia was at that time. And so gave her a job and found her a flat and stuff. So we went there. And
when was this, 70s?
This was 70s, probably 70, I'd say 71. Right into the Civil War, which was great. We were petrol bombed 4 times. Twice we weren't in the house, twice we were. Destroyed the house twice. I was shot at least a dozen times. One went through my leg, but all good. Came out the other side, happy days. And yeah, so it was pretty rough. But and my violent father actually found us. Bizarrely, he managed to bribe the immigration people to work out which country we went to. And then via a photo of me that got passed around the family with the kind of apartment building in the background, he hired a helicopter and flew around till he recognized the background and actually found us. So quite resourceful. I guess that'll probably, I should have thought that would stand me in good stead in the future. But he was very resourceful, if nothing else, and he was nothing else. But yeah, so we then escaped kind of out of there when they were seizing everything from you if you tried to leave the country. So all your money, your clothes. Literally, we walked on the plane in Salisbury to come back to the UK when I was about 12, with literally the clothes we were wearing. All our jewelry was taken off. The suitcases were taken. Our wallets were emptied, and so we had a boarding pass and our passport, and that was it. So we landed.
Did you go to school in Rhodesia or not?
Yeah. So it was a very strict school, actually, like the sort of Tom Brown school days type of school that you would have here. You had to tip your hat to a lady, otherwise you'd get manual labor, where manual labor is basically you had to dig a hole 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter square in this rock hard ground in Africa and then fill it in again. So quite an incentive to tip your hat or open a door or these sorts of things. And I get a cane all the time. And
did you remember do you have mates at school, or was it quite an isolated?
Well, I think at the time, right, so because of the troubles, the UK was imposing sanctions on Rhodesia as well. So having an English accent, I was bullied at school. Funny enough, I'd picked up enough of one that when I came back to the UK, I was bullied for having that accent here as well. But yeah, it wasn't. I mean, I had some friends. I mean, it was interesting. I mean, I remember one of the classes at school was survival, right? And there were 2 specific things stand in my mind, and I don't know why I've remembered them so vividly, because the chance of me ever needing these skills is pretty remote. But one of them was if you ever come across a python, it's a very binary thing. Either it's eaten in the last 6 months and won't be interested, or it hasn't, right? And if it hasn't, these pythons can be 20 feet long, and essentially they can get to you just by stiffening their body. It's like an instant 20-foot movement. And so one of the classes at school was, if you see a fairly slender looking python that needs, lay down flat on your back with your arms tight together like this, and it will try to nudge under, because it's a constrictor, not a poisonous. And so it tried to nudge under you all the way around and eventually decide that you must be dead. And then for some reason, it always starts swallowing you from the feet first. So it dislocates the jaw, starts swallowing you, and you still not got to move until it's past your knee.
And you kick right out.
And you always have a penknife in your pocket. So then you get your penknife out and you just go all the way down the side. Yeah. And I thought, yeah, useful. Noted that one. And then the second one was, if you fall in water where there's crocodiles, again, there's no point in trying to sort of outswim or anything like that. So when Tarzan puts those sticks in the crocodile's mouth, that's kind of nonsense, because that's one of the strongest muscles in nature that it will just crush. But one of the weakest muscles that the crocodile has is the one to open.
Yes, yeah.
So if you can grab the crocodile round its nose and then reach around and poke your thumb in its eye, then it'll swim away. So for those of you listening, those are two life skills.
Can I assume you haven't used either?
I haven't tested them, but they sound pretty believable. I mean, but yeah, that was the sort of thing going on. Anyway, so got with all those added skills, got back to London basically as a refugee coming back into the UK.
Did your mum have any money at the time? Or?
No. I mean, literally everything was taken off us. People were even trying to do things like buy precious stamps and put them on envelopes, and write an address on the envelope to try and get them out of the country. But they literally took everything from you. So and people were sewing stuff into their overcoats and things. All overcoats were taken. It was quite brutal. So the outcome was we landed back in London as essentially refugees, and we found a squat in Stockwell, which was a row of Victorian condemned houses. And I do remember there was another squatter in the next door house. There was a French guy, and the whole place constantly stank of garlic. All his cooking is wafting over.
I was expecting you to say something.
Something else in the back garden, but what we could, the overpowering smell was garlic. So then we stayed there for 2 years while we tried to sort of build a base, and we survived at one point just by breaking into all the other condemned houses and seeing what you could find. The people had just left for demolition, and very often people would leave upright pianos, because long before your time, back in the old days, you would have like a Sunday would be a sing-song in the family. So everyone come around, and at our place we used to have this blind Uncle Georgie who used to play the piano like Uncle Albert on Only Fools and Horses, right? Just basically that. And so all these places would have a piano, but they would never take them with them when they moved, right? So we'd tune them up and then roll them down the Old Kent Road to East Street Market and sell them for £20 each, and that's how we survived for years.
It's not a small thing to push down the. It's like training for your future adventures.
I reckon though, I'm sure there was less potholes in those days than there are now. When I'm on my e-scooter, I do notice them, but certainly we managed to do it. Yeah, and then I got an apprenticeship at Rockwell Automation it was in a place called Bletchley in Milton Keynes.
Yes, yeah.
And I had to basically find any way to get to work. I was roller skating to work at one point because I couldn't afford a bus, and learnt, as an apprentice, it was electronic engineering, and learnt sort of every element of the business before they kind of nailed me down into these sort of repairing robotics, industrial automation types.
I mean, in hindsight, do you look back on your childhood fondly? I mean, it was certainly sounds pretty turbulent. Do you look back on it fondly or not?
Do I look back on it fondly? Well, I certainly don't. I don't believe in having regrets of anything, because we're all kind of a product of our past, of everything that happens to us, good or bad, and anything in between. So I don't wish I am someone else, and therefore, you can't regret the journey, even the tough bits to get there. Actually, the fact of living in Africa as a kid, other than the fact it's made me very, very prone to skin cancer, because no one ever heard of sun creams and God knows what at that time. But I think it's probably a good thing, right? The exposure to a very, very different lifestyle, a completely different environment to the East End of London.
Yeah.
Well, I think was great. The father thing, I think, caused its challenges in my life, and constantly the desire of wanting to be loved probably didn't help my sort of relationship skills in the earlier days. You have to kind of consciously think your way through that one. But look, in general, you're a product of your upbringing.
I can't remember where I saw it. I've been trying to think for a second, but there's something I read, it must have been a couple of weeks ago, which is one of the most clear links between success in entrepreneurship is childhood adversity. And there's another psychologist, Susan something or other, who coins this kind of term, hardiness, and it's this toughness or kind of getting wintered in your childhood, and how that builds up that tolerance, far beyond anything that can happen in adulthood, throughout your kind of business career. Do you think your childhood has been a big contributor to your success in business?
Definitely, and I think there's a sort of a saying that I remind my kids of each time they ask for a new iPhone is, good times create weak people. Weak people create bad times create strong people create good times.
I've heard that too. And that's the evolution.
And that's the cycle, right? And so what you've got to try and do, I think, as a parent is try to manage through that so it doesn't become a cycle, that it becomes maybe a sine wave, but not quite a circle.
Where are we in this country? Which stage of the cycle are we in?
Or don't get me started on woke. Oh dear. I think, I also believe there's a pendulum, right? So when things are, disproportionately wrong in certain direction, regardless of whatever you're thinking about, whether it's, sexism or racism or general kind of right wing, left wing, whatever it is, when you pull the pendulum to one side, it doesn't, even if you're realistic and say, oh, it should be in the middle, the pendulum never stops in the middle. It always has a converse swing.
Yeah.
And I think we're in a converse swing of trying to overwork ourselves at the moment. Yeah. And then the subsequent swing goes back again, and that, hopefully it settles down. But I think we need to sort of learn a little bit more about grafting, I think, again.
Yeah.
And also the simple point of resilience. Getting a disappointment in your life should be looked at as absolutely normal. Yeah, because you can't imagine. No, we all support a football team. I won't tell you which one I support, but everyone has disappointments, right? As an example.
An Arsenal supporter.
I am. But the point being that no one's sort of permanently down, right? You've got to kind of go again. And I remember seeing this amazing. I don't know how amazing it was, but it was an advert in a magazine, a GQ or whatever it was, and it's one of these typical adverts that the advert is so good, but you can't remember what it was advertising, and I don't remember what it was advertising, but it was a picture of a heart monitor, and that you could see this sort of heartbeat going on the screen like this, up and down, and then it went flat. And it said, if you're not experiencing the ups and downs, you're dead, right? And I think that's very important, because you can't gauge elation unless you've had disappointment.
Yeah, the relative is that,
right? And it's that delta that drives the value, because you could be super wealthy and be completely flatlining at the top, or you could be completely destitute and flatlining down there. But if you can create deltas and you almost look forward to the challenges, right? Then you're actually experiencing that kind of elation. And we're not long on the earth, right? So the more times you can experience that, the better. But that does mean that you've got to have an equal number of downsides.
It does. It's a funny thing. We'll hopefully get on this a bit later, but it's one of those funny things that a lot of our guests have spoken about already, in that you kind of look back on those grinding, hustly times back at the start of, be it business or adventure or whatever, and you think, like, in hindsight, damn, that was it. That was what I was chasing, and that kind of, as you say, the tough times. So it's really interesting you say that. So 16.
I'm just going to, before you go on to that, sorry to interrupt, but there's a great song by a guy called Harry Chapin, right, called "Cats in the Cradle." And if you ever sort of read the thing, but the song basically tells a story of this guy that's always working. And each time his son sort of says, oh, Dad, let's play with the football. And, and he goes like, hey, I'll finish this deal first and we'll have a good time then. And then, oh, can you help me with the homework? Yeah, let me finish. And all this goes on and on. And in the end, it flips and the dad phones the son and says, hey, son, I haven't seen you in a while. And the son goes, yeah, I've been busy, Dad. And anyway, we'll have a good time when I finish. So this whole cycle of driving for success can sometimes be the failure, right? And so success is more of a journey than a destination. And if you can look at it as a journey, so all the elements of your meandering and, if you can see every day as part of the success rather than a step towards success, then you'll have a much happier life, I think. So
that leads me so nicely. I'm going to wait, but it leads me on to work-life balance. So 16, you leave school, you go and start at Rockwell.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
You know what? Like almost everything in my life, pure luck. I think it was called a YTS, Youth Training Scheme or something like that back a million years ago. They sort of came to you I left school at 16, as a lot of people did. And I just wanted to earn some money. I saw other people going out and being able to buy a girl a drink or, buy a little Lambretta or something. And I'm like, oh, I want to do that. So I didn't have a longer term vision than, for me, it was already a miracle that I was probably still alive, having been shot at and everything else by this time. So I was looking for kind of quick return, if you like, but short-sighted, small return. And I was told at my sort of, in the last few months of school, do this exam. And it was simple. It was like a multiple choice thing. And again, by luck, I probably didn't know most of the answers, but I seemed to have guessed right. And I came top out of the list of these people that had no hope from their O-levels to get to A-levels. And then I was approached by Rockwell Automation, and they said, you did really well in this exam. Would you like the apprenticeship? What does it pay? And it was, I remember, it was 34 a week was my first gig, and I said so and that was that.
Were you still in Stockwell at this stage or not?
No. So I'd moved to Milton Keynes by this time. They'd found us a home, finally in one of the council estates in Milton Keynes, and that's how I got up there. But I was doing about 7 miles each way on the A5 in Milton Keynes on roller skates to get to work. But it gave me a good grounding because I'm a real proponent of traditional apprenticeships, which we've gone away from in this country, right? Because we look at an apprenticeship as an alternative to higher education, right? When, you can't do A-levels, therefore he's going to do an apprenticeship. In Germany, they look at apprenticeships as an alternative higher education. Right. So it's like, yes, we have respect for you. There's a difference between vocational skills and academic skills. And, we need that. And we're seeing it now, right? We need a lot of skills that we just don't have in this country that are not connected to a degree from university. And, there are hundreds of amazing degrees. And I push everyone to, continue learning in all forms as long as you can. However, if you're just going to university for the sake of it and you end up with a degree in underwater basket weaving and you wonder why you can't get a job at the end of it, then it's not really helpful.
Honestly, it's past our last two guests, both of whom are objectively extremely successful. Neither of them went to university, right, and neither of them would recommend university, which is interesting. And I think one of the anecdotes was, you leave university after 4 years and struggle to get a job and start as a clerk at an investment bank insurance company, and
which you could have done at 16.
Right, exactly. and I think when asked, do you wish you had gone to university? I'll ask us. I think his one line was, I probably would have got laid more.
But do you know, this is it. I mean, when I see how much fun my kids have at uni, and I think, oh my God, that is, but again, no regrets. I can't say I was underlaid, if you like. Yeah. Probably in a different format, but
So 4 years at Rockwell, what was that like?
Yeah, it's good. I actually have fond memories of it because in a proper apprenticeship, what they do is they take you around, they put you in accounts for 4 months. I did panel beating, building the frames I did quality assurance, I did sales, and when you come out of it, I worked on the production line like every day. You really appreciate some of these banal roles of just and you think, as soon as a robot can do this instead of a human being wasting 8 hours of their life, it's so much the better, and then you come out at the end of it and you're quite a rare beast because you know how each of the areas of the business connect together and how they interdepend on each other. So, they were very keen on trying to hold me, as kind of in the business as something that as an asset. And all I could see was like, I just want to earn some more, right? And so I applied for a job in London for a technical director of a French computer manufacturer subsidiary in Putney. Technical director.
Did you feel ready or not?
The hell no, but I was going for it anyway. What's the worst that can happen, And they said yes. So, and they had nothing to be technical about. They hadn't sold a single item in the UK. It was just like a token to say they had a UK subsidiary as a half French government, half group bull investment. And then I was twiddling my thumbs one day and sort of really bored doing nothing. And I was flicking through Yellow Pages and trying to phone some people up and saying, can I introduce you to these computers? And by luck, there was someone in a place in Wales. I think it was near Cardiff. I think it was a place called Raglan. Rings a bell in my mind. Anyway, so they had the BBC Commodore computers. It was their main line, and they just finished it. And they said, we're looking for a new line of computers, so come on down. So I went down there, and they immediately ordered 150 of them or something. And the French headquarters had a panic attack because they'd never needed to source a QWERTY keyboard before, right? So they were running around trying to work out what a QWERTY was. Those who don't know French, is AZERTY in French. It was quite again, pure luck. And then I'd done a couple of these deals, and the MD of the company in London basically had a heart attack. He'd survived, obviously, fortunately for him, but he had a heart attack. And rather than go out on a big search for a relatively small business, they said, well, this guy's name's in lights and he seems to know what he's doing. Do you want to be MD? And this is what I was 21 and 22 maybe. And I said, hell yeah. And
how big was the business? How many people?
Oh, well, it was about 17, 18 people. It wasn't big as the subsidiary.
Yes.
But then I grew it to about 50, 60 people over a couple of years. Moved it out to Twyford. Bought the ground floor in Twyford Business Park, where Sage Software had the rest of the building. And unbeknownst to me, several years later, the guy who's leased me that was to give me a big break in another business. And these things, again, serendipitous or coincidental or whatever. But the world, I know the world is huge, but actually when you're spinning around certain dynamics, you tend to bump into the same people, and with alarming regularity as well. If you're in sort of industry circles or you're in sort of social circles, and that was another bit the story a bit later. But yeah,
I know you said you weren't ready to take over as MD of that business, but given your childhood, I imagine you probably matured pretty young. You had to mature pretty young.
Well, I often had, throughout most of my younger life, I had imposter syndrome. I guess to an extent still do, but I talk about it now so I can absolve myself from it. Sort of, it's someone else's problem if I say it. But I felt really embarrassed about the luck that I'd had. And was that age driven? Was it competence driven, or all of it? Yeah. I didn't really believe I was competent. I didn't feel that I had. That my sort of age/stroke experience warranted it, and there are other people infinitely better or more educated or more intelligent than me that didn't get the lucky break. So, I felt that was a sort of a thing that made me quite introverted at the time.
Mike, how did you deal with that imposter syndrome at the time? And now you say you talk about it. How at the time did you cope with that?
I think in the early days, it wasn't even a thing, right? I mean, you don't know sometimes what's wrong. And I'm not a great sort of fan of therapy as such, and going to tell your woes to somebody. But I do think there is a space for it, and I think it works incredibly well for some people. And for me, that would be too much like admitting a fundamental flaw. So for me, it just wasn't something I recognized at the time. But looking back, I felt I could see that embarrassment, and I say introvert. It was almost like oh God, I walk into every room kind of cowered down, assuming that I'm the.
Did you have anyone around you, girlfriend or friends that you would speak to, or not?
Not so much. I mean, given the fact that we've been whizzing around all over the world, I had no school friends. I had no. I say my siblings were all much older than me, so there wasn't really anyone. I mean, I did cling on to relationships because I was needy, I guess, at the time, and that was the wrong reason to cling on to a relationship, right? So, I probably didn't treat my my partners very well at the time. Well, on a daily basis, yes, but actually, I wasn't there for the right reasons. So, sure. But I guess in a way, we all need stuff, right? So when we have a relationship with someone, part of us wants to give everything to that partner, but also we know that we're drawing things from that partner, right? And that's the symbiotic dynamic that we're looking for anyway in every sort of long-term relationship. You need that. I wasn't aware of background as to why I would need all that stuff, until much later in life. Once you start thinking about this cycle of life and you go, am I going to start being to my kids what my dad was to me? Or am I somehow going to kind of step out of that mode and break the cycle? And it was only when someone was talking to me specifically about that I thought, holy crap, yeah, you're right. If I don't think consciously about breaking the cycle, I will do everything the same. Not to the point of, hitting my wife or something like that, but just being the same type of character. And so there was a conscious sort of moment in my life, probably 15, 20 years ago in particular, that I knew that I had to do something.
Was this pre-Red Bus or was this?
No, well, it was about the same time. So it was actually the time when I had my kids. So, well, there you go. So my eldest is 24, youngest is 18, so somewhere in that area. Yeah. So, and that was the kind of thing where just feared doing this, having that go round again.
Take me back to the start of Red Bus. So from what I've found online, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, at the time that you took over, company's burning circa 2.5 million quid a month, 6 million of cash left, 500 employees.
Yeah.
You have to fire 85% of people on day one.
Yeah.
Fast forward 12 years, you've sold the business for 2.4 billion pounds.
Yeah.
How the hell does a turnaround like that happen?
Again, a lot of luck. A lot of luck. When I took the job on, I didn't even know what a data center was, right? I mean, again, complete BS. I probably need to take you a step back from there, right? And this French computer company, in the end, what I was doing okay with, they decided that they wanted to open a Swedish operation for the Nordics. No one in their business in France could speak any Swedish, Danish, anything, nor could I. I'd never even been there, but I spoke better English than they did. So they said, why don't you come over and open that? And I was sitting in the French office, and then they ended up going bankrupt. So I was stuck in France, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to live here. I'll stay in Paris. Managed to get a job in Paris. Another complete lucky thing. I was looking for a job, couldn't find it. I couldn't even read French. I had no knowledge of French at all. And I was looking through the sort of classifieds, and I saw this English ad for a personal assistant in a computer company. And I phoned them up and I said, look, I don't want to be a personal assistant, PA, but I, it's in English, so I can speak English. And they went, oh, come on down. And it was literally this guy from Computer Center in the UK had moved out there to set up this big operation across France and across Europe. So I was kind of employee number 2, 3 in that business, random, and stayed in France for 12 years. Ended up really having a great time in Paris, moving to a chateau in the Loire Valley for a few years. And then I came to the UK looking for another role, still pre-Red Bus. And I was given a role by a then company called ICL, which was the kind of British IBM equivalent. It was a mainframe
You start to feel more qualified as this goes on?
I was a little cockier, yeah. So I'd done a couple of really, really good deals again, but I was really a salesman. I'd come out of tech as a sort of a technical person and become a salesman. And I found that the way to overcome my shyness, I don't know if you've ever met Michael McIntyre, but he's the most brilliant guy, but he's constant, even on a private basis, he can't stop being Michael McIntyre on the TV. And that was like me. I was always kind of, and so it was like a mask to the kind of insecurities that I had inside. But anyway, so they gave me this role in Denmark to be general manager of ICL Denmark, which was a basket case of a business. They'd had 3 general managers. It was terrible. It was like a mainframe break fix business, and they were trying to turn it into a managed service business, and no one could do it. And I remember the guy, a lovely chap, he's passed away now, a guy called David Polk at ICL, and he said, gave me great confidence. He said, well, look, it's so bad out there that even you couldn't screw it up anymore. And I thought, yeah, that's the kind of place I need. And so anyway, I was out there, and I'd been there about 2 weeks, and no one was talking to me. They thought, oh, this is the next, next in line of a long list of failed CEOs coming out to try and tell us what to do from the UK sort of thing. And there was about 300 to 350 employees in the Danish operation. And there was no chance of getting any managed service. They didn't have any traction. They had no reference points, no nothing. So I thought, well, I have to get the hearts and minds first. And it was coming up to Christmas, and I rented a Danish Father Christmas outfit. Now, for those of you that don't know what a Danish Father, it's very similar to a normal Father Christmas outfit, except big furry grey trousers, and they wear clogs, like Dutch clogs, right? Bizarre. Anyway, so I ordered this to come in on a Friday evening in the office, and about 4:00 on Fridays, everyone was gone, completely empty, trying this outfit on. So what I was going to do was on the Saturday and Sunday, kept it a secret. I had my PA build a map of Denmark, and everywhere that people's houses were that had kids, I would drive around dressed as Father Christmas and give them a Christmas present, right? And that was my weekend plan from 9:00 in the morning to 9 at night, both days. So I was trying this on the Friday night in the office, and this guy walks past, and he looks in and goes, Mike, what are you doing? And so I explained to him, I said, you can't tell anyone, but this is a secret. Tomorrow I'm doing this. He went, okay. Well, as you're dressed, my wife works in the Danish state hospital, and she's in the alcoholics ward, right? And they never get any people come and see them at Christmas. It might be their only Christmas left. And would you mind in your outfit coming and giving them a Christmas wish, right? So, oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I had a load of chocolates in my sack, took the liqueurs out, of course.
Yeah, of course. Talk about a side hustle.
Yeah. Anyway, so I get there, and there, it broke me. There were people, they wouldn't leave, right? And just felt, some of them were so thankful that someone had even just bothered to turn up before Christmas and wish them, some nice things. Anyway, he's gone. I finish. So I'm now going home. I jump in a cab, and I could see this guy looking in his rearview mirror, looking at Father Christmas coming. And what I didn't realize was the alcohol. There was often breakouts of the alcoholics ward, right? They probably thought I was a bit strange coming out dressed as Father Christmas. And he said, look, I've got to ask, what on earth is going on here? So I explained to him, and he says, well, funny enough, I said, I'm not really a Father Christmas, I'm actually a computer guy. He said, well, funny enough, I'm not really a taxi driver. I'm a clown, right? So in literal sense, he was a professional clown, made those sort of balloon animals and stuff like that. Yeah. And he says, I come back to Denmark every 6 months. I earn enough money, and I go traveling around Africa, and I entertain at little villages and things like that. And I thought, that's amazing. He said, here's my card. I said, well, next time I need a balloon animal, Anyway, so time went past, completely unsuccessful time at ICL. It was really getting no traction. And then I get this call from, his name was John Christensen, and he said, oh, do you remember me? I was your taxi driver. I went, oh, yeah. He says, well, look, they're opening a new ward in this brand new hospital. It's a children's ward. I'm going to do some balloons and things. And I remember you were in computers. Do you think you could get some games, some laptops? Like, yeah, leave it with me. And so ICL was just being bought by Fujitsu at the time. So I got a load of laptops, a load of Microsoft games and things like this. And then we go in there, and he does some magic tricks. I do some magic tricks because I was actually a member of the Magic Circle at that time, but that's another story. And then I deliver all these things and everything else. And they were filming it in the hospital. It was a great time, really nice. And what I didn't know, anyway, so that was the I don't know, it was a Tuesday night or something. And the Wednesday, I get all these phone calls, and they say, Mike, did you see the daily newspaper today? And I said, no. Well, you're all over it, right? All these pictures. And I thought it was just the hospital taking pictures of that, but no, it's the newspapers. And there's this headline saying, can hard-nosed technology CEO have a heart, or something like that, right? And they'd filmed this whole thing. And then I got a call that day from the Department of Health, and they said, we're just closing a tender for a managed service play. You absolutely weren't even invited because you don't have any managed service experience. But we read that you're in managed services. We didn't know. And I said, yes. And of course, the challenge here was you can't get in without the reference, and I can't get a reference without getting in. Yeah. And so they said, we think you should tender. And I went like, yeah, I know, but the deadline is like now. Tender. So we tendered it, ran, rush job, we tendered, and we won it. It was the first deal, big deal with the Department of Health. And when we sort of had the meeting afterwards, he said, look, we knew that if you cared, then you're going to care about us, right? So we put our faith in you as a human doing the right thing, rather than just the numbers on the page. Obviously, the numbers had to stack up and everything else.
Of course.
And that was our big break, because with them as our reference point, we then won a load more deals. And then it flew on. So again, complete randomness, right?
That is
and then so then, because I'd done a great job in that, then Fujitsu said, can you start this e-business operation in Germany? So then I moved to Frankfurt and set up this e-business operation right in 2001. I'm coming back to your question now. In 2001, .com market crashed. I had a 2-year-old born in Denmark. I had a 1-month-old born in Frankfurt. And I said, right, let's get back to London and hunker down and take whatever job it is. I'm probably safer there than anywhere else. And that's how I came to Redbus. I just said yes, joined, and I didn't do my due diligence.
Were you aware of the situation?
No idea whatsoever.
Interesting.
Nothing at all. And it was irresponsible, but I just wanted a job in the UK. But
was it listed at the time or not?
It was listed, yeah. It was on the main market. It raised 450 million and basically spent it. And we had private jets and God knows what, as everyone did in the .com boom, right? And so I just knocked on the door of the board meeting and said, guys, I don't know what these two have been telling you, but we don't have a business in 6 weeks, and probably you're illegal right now for not announcing that we're going bankrupt to the market. You've got to do something. And then there was this massive bust up in the boardroom. The two founders stormed out, and they said, well, Mike, if you think you can do something, do it. I said, well, I don't know. And then by pure luck again, so there was this chap called John Porter who was kind of acting chair at the time. And he was son of Dame Shirley Porter, who was the only woman in history that's ever been charged for gerrymandering. She was doing she was Westminster councillor back in the day. And I think his grandfather was Leslie Porter, who created Tesco's. Anyway, so he was kind of there, but his post used to come in, and he wasn't there anymore, stormed off. So I was opening up his post, and there was this membership book it was Queenwood Golf Club.
Yeah.
Right?
Berkshire. It's Surrey or Berkshire?
I'm not a great golfer. So, but anyway, it's Queenwood. And I was flicking through it, and it had obviously John Porter's name in there, but it had their home phone numbers and their addresses and everything. And there was Mr. and Mrs. Michael Douglas. There was Mr. Gillette. And I don't know, wow, it's amazing. Anyway, so I saw this one name that I thought I'd heard John mention in the past, American guy, Oliver Grace, who was part of the Grace family from petrochemicals and that sort of thing. So I phoned him up and I said, John's asked me to call you. We're looking at this great business that we think you should invest in. And he went, fine, I'm over in London. I found his phone number from the Queenwood. And he's a member, but he never played there because he's based in America, right? And so I found his number, and he came over, and I pitched it to him to take the business private. And I said, look, it's a great business. It's ahead of its time. It needs survival. We'll close some data centers, cut everyone. And this come back to your point, 85% of the staff I was the only person out of all the board members and everyone that had the courage to stand there and say, you're all made redundant. I was spat at, swore at, and I was devastated.
Was there a moment where you thought, I can't do this, or not?
No. It was, I was almost in survival mode myself, right? Because I didn't have a proverbial to pee in, right? And I was like, I need this job. I had to concentrate on the 15% of the workers that I was going to keep the jobs for, rather than the ones that I was making redundant. Anyway, we did it, and Oliver came over. He brought this other brilliant guy called Boris Jordan, he's called the cannabis king in the States. He's got.
I know his sons. Funnily enough, I went to school with his sons. Yeah,
no, it's super interesting. Yeah. So him and his wife Elizabeth, they live down in
near Wentworth.
Wentworth, yeah, it was in Wentworth, and so he came in, and then a guy called Bo Benson, who is a Dane who started Just Eat. Right. Anyway, so the three of them sounds like the beginning of a joke, right? The American, the Russian, and the Dane. Anyway, they basically
possibly go wrong.
yeah, exactly. So we formed a consortium and we took the business private. I think it was about 23 million to take everyone off the table at that time. And then we worked hard to kind of build it up. And then there was this business called Telecity, which was doing exactly the same as Redbus. And so we eventually cut a deal to merge them. That has its own funny stories. But then we relisted it in 2007 for about 250 million. And by then, technology was really kicking off, and data centers were the thing to be, and we were miles ahead of the game. And as you say, we sold it to Equinix in 2015 for about, I think, $3 billion. Yeah.
How quickly did you feel things starting to turn around at Redbus?
As soon as I got the injection of equity, right? Most companies will survive or fail if they are. With technology, we tend to overestimate the uptake in a short period of time, and we underestimate the uptake in a longer period of time, right? How long have we been talking about driverless cars, right? How long were we talking about the cloud before the cloud became normal? We've been talking about AI for goodness knows how. We're going to continue to talk about it before it becomes mainstream. But it will. All of these things will happen. They will be there. Technology is great, right? I mean, it's a bit like toothpaste. Once you've invented something, you can't uninvent it. You can't push the toothpaste back in the tube. So it will happen once regulation and all these things come to pass that makes it so. Driverless cars aren't going to be forgotten about and just disappear. They will happen. Being able to have some equity and hold on. So, and see the sort of, today I'm getting one order, next week I might have 2 orders, and then you can plant the sort of seeds of a trajectory in the future. That was pretty quickly evident that as long as you could fund your cash burn, and that's often the case with tech companies, brilliant. I've had amazing companies with great founders running out of cash and seen never again, right? Or someone comes in at the last minute, picks them up for nothing, and then makes a brilliant story out of it. So having cash is super important.
How did life change after selling Telecity? You wake up the next morning, what's going through your head? It's funny because one of our last guests talked about this feeling of just being hollow. Can you relate to that or not?
So I'd started to get bored as a CEO towards the end anyway, because the business was so good, the management team was so brilliant. If I didn't come in the morning, no one would have noticed, right? And so for me, it wasn't testing anymore. And all my life, I'd been in a position where I'm like fighting for every step. And so having something that's just happening around me didn't feel, I was getting awards here, awards there. And again, the imposter syndrome was still kicking in like a good one. But I think, it was time for me to feel pain again, I think. So I decided to sort of not have a day job anymore and start working on non-exec roles. And the challenge with that was, okay, I've got a 5-year window. I'm going to have to work and graft and hopefully every year bring on 2 or 3 new deals, and then after 5 years, let's say the exits start to happen. And then given the fact I've been bringing them on, then it should be cabs off ranks every year, right? And then you get the value. But for those first 5 years, it was scary because you didn't have any guarantee that any of this would work. And that kind of buzz was more exciting again, right? So there was the insecurity of knowing that you do have to do stuff. You do have to pick up a phone and engage with people. And I was very lucky that data centers as an industry started to become more and more kind of very hot, right? I mean, the cash generation of these businesses, the fact that you could get ridiculous EBITDA multiples for them and all this sort of stuff. So, and I was the kind of the guru of them, even though I probably didn't deserve it. But so that was good. And then I started to do a few other things outside of data centers and so on and so forth. But that was it was already feeling hollow before the end.
I mean, it's interesting because I know that you're chairman of companies like AudioBeam. I've got 2 questions. The first one is that what do you look for when you get involved with these either advisory or NED or chairman roles? And the second question is that, I mean, you're clearly an operator. Do you find it hard to invest in other people's businesses or not?
No. I had this horrible meddling chairman at Telecity in the old days. And when we were due to re-IPO, I chose him, a guy called John Hughes, and he'd been a chair of Sophos and chair of Thales and a bunch. And if you look at his history, he's no longer with us now. But he always became an executive chair. So I said to him, the only thing that I really did, a nice silvery haired guy, good for the city, exactly what I wasn't, with my buttons all undone and all this sort of stuff. So I said, the only thing that worries me is that you always become executive chair. And he went, yeah, Mike, I've learned not to do that. And of course he did become executive chair and all the rest of it. But, I've learned a lot about the loneliness of a CEO and the fear that a CEO has from everyone around him, all your stakeholders, whether that's private equity or venture or seed or everyone, right, is like attacking. And you need someone just to be on your side, just to help you think about stuff when when it's too much to think about, and to break it down into bite-sized pieces again, right? And so I always said that if I ever did non-exec work, that would be my role as chairman, to be hands-off, very much hands-off, and just guide management, and make sure that management has a journey that's beneficial to them personally as well. Allow them to learn, allow them to make mistakes. If you take the words failure and mistake out of your equation and call them learning, allow them to learn or succeed all the time. That's a really kind of beneficial thing for them that I can add value to. And I look, coming back to your first point, I look for things where I think most things I can add some value to in some form, but it's whether I feel I can get a bit of learning the other way as well, right? So slightly different industries. And what's amazing is that technology doesn't have its own industry anymore, right? So the internet, for example, it used to be the internet was an industry. And now no one thinks of it as an industry because it's pervasive in everything that we do.
Yeah.
And it's the same as where we talk about AI at the moment, right? And that's just going to be a utility at some point that is going to be pervasive in every business. And I think that with an appreciation and understanding of what technology can bring and what it can do, I can add value, but then I can learn about the sort of that specific industry and say, wow, isn't that clever? I never thought of doing things like that before. And I never knew that went into, buying an ice cream, what goes behind the technology and making the Mr. Whiffy or whatever. I don't know what it is. I'm making it up as well. But I think that's the thing, is learning, being able to learn something as well. Life's too short, right? And you've got to have fun. I look for great people to work with. Just people I think I can get on with. Arseholes don't make the cut, really. So, and then just enjoy.
Mike, do you have the same hunger for business that you had when you were 20 years old, or has that kind of shifted towards the charity work and the extracurricular stuff?
Yeah, I'd like to say I have the same hunger, but I think if I was really honest, I would say it's something I enjoy keeping busy with. I mean, I like learning about new business. I like learning about technologies, but I get a real kick about having success. So helping founders, helping management teams, start at 1x and finish at 5x is great. It's a buzz. And it's also kind of the means to the end. And the end is more sort of giving back and making myself feel good about the charity work that we do. I try to sort of explain to people, as I mentioned, the selfishness of charitable giving. But if you travel a lot by plane, you'll always hear the same, and regardless of which airline it is, they always say the same. In the event of an emergency, these oxygen masks drop out, and then you pull it and you put it over your head like this, and then they always say, always make sure your mask is fitted before helping someone else, which is counterintuitive when you're trying to be a benevolent person. I must help this poor little child put his mask on. But in fact, if they're panicking and they're going crazy and you're then starting to not be able to breathe, then both of you don't have a mask. So making sure your mask is on is so that you're in a fit state to help everyone else. And I look at continuing my kind of a job, if you like, as a continuous way to help others. You've got to have your mask fitted, so it's just getting a better mask.
When did that motivation change? Or has it been a kind of bit of an evolution?
It's been an evolution. So when it could have changed was when I kind of created enough value for myself that I didn't need to do it anymore. But it didn't change then, because I was always scared that, but what happens if that disappears, or what happens?
Enough's enough.
It's never, I better have a bit more, always a bit more. And that's kind of evolved into, yes, I want a bit more, and I have a lot more, but I want it for different reasons. I want it to be able to do more in the things. So we have our own foundation as well that does things, but I wanted to be able to give more value where we feel people are really needing it.
I've noticed a lot of your charity work is focused on the kind of empowerment and education of young people and children.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a reflection of, or do you feel that's come from your tough kind of upbringing or not?
Yeah, it is. And I think, again, back through the guilt, right? It's kind of, but for the grace of God, there go I type thing. If young kid born in an underprivileged environment, that was random. When I was born in a place that I could actually get a job was random. So why should that person have less of an opportunity? We do a lot in Africa and India, and these kids are bright. They want to learn. They're desperate to learn. And I sometimes I feel that perhaps the youth in this country is less excited about learning than some of those are. And you kind of go, well, if they're going to want to learn that much and they're really diligent and they're going to work hard through school, maybe, just maybe, that one child that you help could develop a cure for an illness that my grandchildren might develop, right? And then you go, heaven forbid, but then you go, well, actually, I'm thinking about it selfishly again. But if there's a half a chance at that moment in the hindsight and the sniff test, I'd rather help any kid I can now get an education. So it's really looking back and sort of saying, well, what's going to drive? Yeah, I want my daughter to buy a nice Ferrari and park it in the street without it getting keyed by a jealous person. I want someone to look at it and say, aspirationally, well, I'm going to have one of those. Right? So in order for people to have aspiration and not jealousy, you've got to create an opportunistic environment for them. They've got to believe they have the capability of getting the Ferrari at some time. And whether they get it or not, it may be up to them, but at least the opportunity should be there. So for instance, Trust gets kids back off the streets when they've slipped between the tracks and maybe got involved in a gang stupidly because there was no mentor or no father figure or something, right? And a little bit of nudging in the right direction, and you've got someone back in the right groove, and you turn that jealousy into aspiration again.
I'm interested in the challenges of bringing up your kids in probably a diametrically opposed way, versus your upbringing, but also in contrast to the kind of the kids you're helping around the world. How do you manage that? From a personal point of view? Well,
I think they haven't been unscarred. I mean, when they were very young, I got divorced and they suffered obvious trauma of that. And I've worked very hard to make sure that, they felt loved all the way through and they felt stable as much as they could. I'm still, again, very happy about how things have worked out, because I don't think you should stay in a marriage where you're unhappy just for the sake of the kids, because they can tell that, they can absolutely tell when you're unhappy. I have the best relationship with them at the moment. They're really, really wonderful best friends of my wife now, and all things have worked out well. But it's been a conscious focus on making sure, and I thank my wife Shalina as well for the way she's worked on this as well, because that's a job and a half, taking on a new relationship with kids in tow, sort of thing. But everyone plays their part in there. My ex-wife has played a part in making sure that they have grown up as stable as possible in a modern world where divorce is relatively common. But I think it's the nurturing, respect, opportunity. I mean, they're incredibly privileged, but at the same time, I don't feel that they're spoiled. I think there's a difference. It's a subtle difference, I suppose, but I make a distinction of paying for their education, but not paying for their holidays. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. I'm interested that you speak a hell of a lot about luck, and maybe that's a testament to your character, but I want to ask you, if you can, to distill into a sentence or something, why you think you've been so successful. And you can't say luck. Because luck is, of course, a component, but why you think you've been such a successful, determined, driven entrepreneur?
I've learned to look at challenges in life and obstacles in life as a differentiator between you and everyone else, if you can get over them, which means falling down, getting punched isn't the issue. It's only an issue if you don't get up again. Right? That's the only time that a boxer loses, right? Is if he falls down, he hasn't lost unless he stays down. So I think if you think about two businesses and they're largely in the same space, they're going to go through the same chat. They're going to go through fundraising requirements. They're going to go through finding the right employees. They're going to go through technology issues. They're going to go through cash flow. They're all the same problems. There's nothing special between one versus the other. They're all on the same journey. So the quicker you can hit a roadblock and surmount the roadblock, you've just created between you and your competition a roadblock. Now it's a differentiator. And the quicker you can get through the obstacles, and you should see a problem or a challenge and go, yes, thank you. There's an opportunity for me to differentiate. Because if there weren't any of those, there'd be no delta between you and the competition. So I think looking at stuff in the view of getting up every time you fall down, resilience, it's a long one sentence, but
it goes back
distill it into resilience.
I mean, it's almost what we said right at the beginning, probably the first couple of questions was going into this kind of hardiness, this idea of hardiness. That's fascinating.
I'll tell you one little story before we go on there, because I just remember this. I was taught to sell at that old French computer company by a lovely guy called Ian Watson, who was actually the Canadian singer Bryan Adams' cousin, believe it or not. So we used to go backstage every time he was over. It's another story. Anyway, so he said, imagine you're a broom salesman and it's a family business. They've been selling brooms for 150 years, right? And you've got a row of terraced houses in front of you. There's 100 terraced houses. And because of all the data you have in 150 years of selling brooms, you know the chance of you selling a broom in these 100 houses looks roughly, through all the stats you've got over years, it looks roughly like this. 98% of those 98 of the 100 houses will have a broom, right? One house will not have a broom, but can't afford your broom or don't like your broom. And one house doesn't have a broom, can afford it, and will like it and buy it. And that's all the data you have. So when you turn up and you knock on the door, it doesn't matter where you start, you knock on the door and the door opens, you go, hello, I would like that. And it goes, slams in your face. You should go, yes.
One step closer to my sale,
right? And yet we look at failure, we look at disappointment, not as a step towards victory, but as this, oh my God, insurmountable dynamic, right? But if you can get the concept that statistically, you're not going to succeed in everything, but statistically, you are going to succeed in things if you do enough of them, right? So knock on enough doors, you sell a broom.
That's a nice analogy. I'm taking away from this, before we wrap up, I'm taking away from this a few things. The first one is no such thing as failure, only learnings. Mm-hmm. Second thing is no regrets. And the third thing I want to selfishly ask you is, you've obviously been, despite huge individuality, you've built amazing teams around you. What advice would you give me as kind of someone fairly young starting a business? What advice would you give me in terms of building teams?
I guess two things. One is always get the best person you can possibly find. Never be afraid of getting people more intelligent or better or smarter. Just surround yourself with brilliant people, because whoever you surround yourself with, you will become, right? And if you surround yourself with yes people, it's the sort of chase to the bottom. And if you surround yourself with brilliant people, it's the chase upwards. And the second thing I would say is recruit on attitude and not on skills. Because most people that are coming out of university now will probably have a job that didn't even exist when they went into university, right? So less about, oh, has he done that? I mean, it always amazes me when people say, I'm looking for someone that's got a load of experience in doing this. Well, why do you think he's just leaving the job that he's been doing to get the experience of doing it? Why not give him a completely fresh set of challenges? And so I always look for the right attitude. Attitude is much harder to train in someone than a skill is, right? I can teach people how to, do origami, right? But if they haven't got the patience for it, they're never going to learn it. So attitude is everything to me.
Mike, I want to wrap up with two things. The first one I want to ask you is that if you could go back and give your, maybe 18 was too old in your case, but your 16-year-old self one piece of advice, what would that be? And then the second question is, who would be your dream interview guest? Either someone you know, don't know. Who would that be?
Goodness me, that's a tough one. Well, I think telling myself it's okay is good. It's always going to be okay. Just keep getting up. The times as a teenager that I felt sorry for myself, you shouldn't. And also don't worry about I'll probably write myself a long letter now as I was thinking about it, but don't worry about getting things right every time. You're so young at that age and you just kind of like so much to mess up on and learn. So that, I guess, all about kind of not worrying and learning on the job, and success is a journey, that sort of thing. Who would I interview? Blimey.
You also can't say your 16-year-old self.
I get it was
someone
actually,
else.
That would be quite scary. Napoleon, because he obviously had some sort of inferiority complex, right? And he also had drive, in bucketfuls, and experienced great highs and great lows. And I guess that'd be an interesting one.
Yeah.
He used to, given the fact that he, obviously fought against the English, but he used to, in Corsica, he came from Corsica originally, he used to go down, his mother would make this beautiful bread and he'd go and trade it with the English sailors with their horrible black bread. and he'd give them fresh bread because he wanted to be like an English sailor. It's quite interesting.
We've had Charlie Munger as one of the other guests, kind of dream guest. I don't think I'm going to be able to get Napoleon on. But that's absolutely flown by. That has been, for me, a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
It's been a delight.
And hopefully we do it again soon.
Look forward to it.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.